1915, the year of invention, from the first compact fridges, to the first prototype military tank, to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, better known as NACA. Wait, is it NACA?
We have records from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the NACA.
NACA. The NACA was a federal agency founded during World War I that promoted war-related aeronautical research. From it was born the X-plane program, which made some pretty cool supersonic aircrafts that were the first to break the sound barrier. A few decades and a bunch of legal mumbo-jumbo later, the NACA was dissolved and reborn as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA.
You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite, one of the great scientific feats of the age.
1957, the Soviet Union launches the Sputnik and the space race begins. A Soviet satellite orbiting Earth for nearly 3 months makes Americans experience a wave of anxiety known as the Sputnik crisis. If they were able to get a satellite up in orbit before us, in a response, NASA created the Mercury Program, which was the first American human space program.
Today we are introducing to you and to the world these 7 men who have been selected to begin training for orbital space flight.
Project Mercury ran from 1958 through 1963, with the main goal of putting a man in orbit and returning him to safety, before the Soviets, of course. Sadly, the Soviets put Yuri Gagarin into orbit first, but NASA does not back down. 1 month later, Alan Shepard is the first American to be placed into suborbital flight, and in 1962, John Glenn makes 3 orbits around Earth. These monumental moments in the progression of human spaceflight gained the support of the public and allowed for the space race to come to its near end.
To achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The Apollo program, formed alongside its sister program Gemini, had 1 mission and 1 mission only enacted by the US president: to get a man on the moon. Before the Soviets, of course. On the other hand, the Gemini program had an objective for developing space travel techniques specifically to aid in the Apollo missions. Apollo, alongside Gemini, put the USA at a lead in the space race. January 27, 1967. Apollo 1 was planned as the first manned flight of the Apollo program, with astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Schaff on board. However, Apollo 1 became a mission that never got to launch.
Hey, how are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 3 buildings? Hey! Let's go far in the concept.
Communication issues between the spacecraft in Cape Canaveral and Mission Control in Houston caused delays. In the midst of all the commotion, fire broke out in the command module. It quickly spread through flammable materials in the pure oxygen state of the cabin. The entire crew perished just 17 seconds after the first sign of fire. This was due to having no escape through the inner hatch, which was sealed shut by the high pressure inside the spacecraft. This tragedy shocked the nation. If NASA wanted to continue the Apollo program, it had to address all the hazards and ensure the next manned mission would be a success. After many uncrewed test flights and the successful manned flight of Apollo 7, the Apollo program was back on track.
That's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
Kennedy's goal was finally accomplished with the Apollo 11 mission, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed the Apollo lunar module on the moon on July 20th, 1969, and walked the lunar surface with Michael Collins remaining in the lunar orbit. The entire crew landed safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th. In the years that followed, 5 Apollo missions landed astronauts on the moon, with a total of 12 people who walked on the moon.
We got 4/10 of a foot per second, Houston. Roger. Bye-bye, Skylab.
The Skylab was the first space station launched by NASA exclusively for the United States. It was occupied for about 24 weeks between the years 1973 and 1974 and was a dwarf compared to the space station, which is about 5 times as large.
The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up.
The 3 trios of astronaut crews sent to the Skylab conducted hundreds of experiments among orbital workshops and solar Earth observatories. The small space station was known for its great studies of the Sun and even contributed to a Nobel Prize. Although the program was cancelled as efforts shifted to the Space Shuttle program, and the Skylab's orbit eventually decayed and disintegrated in the atmosphere on July 11, 1979, after orbiting alone for nearly 6 years. The Space Shuttle was the first partially reusable low-orbital spacecraft system with 2 reusable solid rocket boosters, which was operated for nearly 30 years as a part of the Space Shuttle program. It consisted of 5 total Space Shuttle orbiters: Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour, which were assigned to fly at least 100 missions each. Over the course of the program, however, they had 135 missions flown in total with over 850 shuttle flyers. NASA's Space Shuttle program was a key contribution to the International Space Station by helping in the construction process. But why does it look like an airplane? The unique thing about the space shuttles were their maneuvers. They launched like a rocket, stayed in orbit like a spacecraft, and most importantly, landed like an airplane. This allowed for safe retrieval of the reusable components. The flight tests conducted by Enterprise totaled up to 16 separate missions, crewed and uncrewed, until October 26, 1977, when the last free flight test was conducted and Enterprise landed on the runway like intended rather than a lake bed. On April 12, 1981, Columbia's STS-1, or the Space Transportation System 1, was planned to be the first of 5 shuttle orbiters to fly in space. Astronauts John W. Young and Robert Crippen aboard STS-1 made 37 orbits around Earth in a span of 2 days before ultimately returning to Earth on April 14th. Between the years of 1981 and 1986, the Space Shuttle program had 24 flown missions before disaster struck. The Space Shuttle Challenger was originally planned for the 23rd of January, but was pushed back due to another delayed mission and then pushed back again because of unfavorable weather. On the 28th of January, 1986, the air was thick in mission control. Challenger was finally scheduled to be launched into clear skies, but something felt off. Multiple people on the ground raised concerns about the mission before it even launched. On board were 7 astronauts who had been preparing for months to board the shuttle, but 73 seconds after takeoff, Challenger exploded mid-air.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
Krista McAuliffe, Gregory Jarvis, Judith Resnick, Francis Scobie, Ronald McNair, Mike Smith, and Ellison Onizuka all perished. President Ronald Reagan created the Rogers Commission immediately after the terrifying explosion. The purpose was to find out what caused the explosion, and it became clear that major modifications to the entire space crew program had to be made. The commission concluded that the explosion was caused by the failure of an O-ring seal on one of the 2 solid fuel tanks, due to the cold temperatures at launch time. All Space Shuttle flights were on halt for 2 years and 8 months as they redesigned hazards and added safety features to the spacecraft.
And liftoff! Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
In September of 1988, the Space Shuttle program continued after the successful launch of the Discovery Shuttle. In the years that followed, the Space Shuttle carried out numerous important missions, like maintenance on the Hubble telescope and the construction of the International Space Station. Just when NASA was able to put the past behind them, a second disaster shocked the nation. On February 1, 2003, Columbia disintegrated in the atmosphere upon re-entry after 16 days of non-stop experiments in orbit. The catastrophe was caused by damage sustained during launch, when a piece of foam insulation from the external fuel tank struck the shuttle's left wing. This breach allowed for hot atmospheric gases to penetrate the wing during re-entry, leading to the shuttle's destruction. In response to the Columbia disaster, NASA grounded the Space Shuttle program for over 2 years again and launched an investigation, this time through the Columbian Accident Investigation Board. To fix this, NASA redesigned the foam on the fuel tank, added in flight checks for damage, and created ways to repair the shuttle in space. These changes were tested during the first shuttle flight after the disaster in 2005. After 135 total missions, the Space Shuttle program ended in 2011, as NASA started to shift their focus to developing new spacecraft for deeper space exploration.
Hello, Houston, I got 2 messages for you. Moscow is go for docking. Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys. Have fun.
Back to the 70s, when the Apollo-Soyuz test project in 1975 was a historic moment when Cold War rivals, the US and the Soviet Union, came together for a groundbreaking space mission. It was the first time an American Apollo spacecraft and a Soviet Soyuz capsule docked in space, symbolizing not just technical triumph, but a bold step towards peace and collaboration in the aeronautical industry. Fast forward to the 1990s, and the Shuttle program took international cooperation to the next level. From 1993 to 1998, NASA's space shuttles regularly docked with Russia's Mir space station, creating a unique orbiting laboratory where astronauts lived and worked side by side. This collaboration paved the way for even more ambitious space projects, such as the International Space Station later on, showing that when 2 nations join forces in space, they can achieve many things.
Main engine start, 6 engines up and running, and liftoff.
The International Space Station, or ISS, is a multinational collaborative project and the largest human-made structure currently in space. Launched in 1998, it serves as an orbiting laboratory and living space for astronauts all around the world. It is built and maintained by many space agencies. It is a huge symbol of global cooperation in space exploration. The ISS is primarily used for scientific research across many different fields, like biology, physics, astronomy, and the Earth sciences. In microgravity, scientists can conduct experiments that are not possible on Earth, leading through breakthroughs in medical research and many different sciences. The ISS also plays a crucial role in testing further technologies for long-term space missions, such as possible missions to Mars. In addition to scientific research, the ISS is a hub for international partnerships and educational outreach. It has been visited by astronauts from 19 different countries and engages the public through live broadcasts, student projects, and many virtual tours. The ISS also acts as a stepping stone for private companies that support the development of commercial space missions. Since it is a continuously inhabited space station for over 20 years, the ISS has demonstrated the potential for humans to live and work in space for extended periods of time. This contributes significantly to humanity's understanding of living beyond Earth.
We know now, however, who will build those spacecraft. The Boeing Corporation and Space Exploration Technologies, or SpaceX, have each presented to us designs that will allow us to fly crews to the International Space Station in just a few years.
The Commercial Crew Program is a groundbreaking initiative by NASA that provides crew transportation services to the International Space Station through partnerships with private companies. Launched in 2011, the program marked a shift from NASA developing its own crewed spacecraft to utilizing the commercial sector for astronaut transport. This includes SpaceX with the Crew Dragon spacecraft and Boeing with the Starliner. NASA has contracted a total of 20 missions, 6 from Boeing and 14 from SpaceX, ensuring continued support for the ISS through 2030. Each mission will transport up to 4 astronauts to the International Space Station, with flights occurring approximately every 6 months and overlapping missions for more efficiency. SpaceX's Crew Dragon returns to Earth via ocean splashdown, while the Boeing Starliner lands on solid ground using airbags. This program emerged after the retirement of the Space Shuttle program in 2011, which forced NASA to rely on the Russia's Soyuz program for astronaut transport due to lack of funding until the first Commercial Crew Program mission launched. This shift towards commercial partnerships came from the Aldrich Commission's 2004 recommendations and the cancellation of NASA's Constellation program in 2010, which aimed for lunar exploration. The Commercial Crew Program not only alleviates NASA's reliance on international partners, but it also sparks innovation and competitiveness in the aerospace industry. This paves the way for future exploration and collaboration in low Earth orbit.
5, 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Officially established in 2017, Artemis aims not only to re-establish a human presence on the moon, but also to lay the groundwork for future human missions to Mars. At the heart of Artemis lies inspiration from the now cancelled Constellation program. The program will utilize the Orion spacecraft and a powerful space launch system, similar to the Ares V rocket of the Constellation program. Artemis also features hopeful developments of a space station orbiting the moon and the human landing system. These are being developed through many partnerships between government space agencies and private companies. The SLS, Orion, and Human Landing System together form the core infrastructure for Artemis missions, while the Lunar Gateway will serve as a hub for human habitation. Some critics have raised concerns about certain aspects, like the sustainability of the orbit plan for the Lunar Gateway. The Space Shuttle Orion was originally set to launch in 2016, but after multiple delays, the Orion spacecraft was launched during the Artemis 1 mission on November 16, 2022. It was carrying a crew of robots and mannequins to test its systems. The crewed Artemis 2 mission is expected to launch in late 2025, and Artemis 3 plans for lunar landing in late 2026. This mission aims to land the first woman and the next man on the moon. Following that, Artemis 4 is scheduled to dock with the Lunar Gateway in late 2028, and Artemis 5 will feature collaborative efforts with Europe and Canada. NASA envisions annual lunar landings after Artemis 6, set to integrate advanced facilities like the Crew and Science Airlock with the Lunar Gateway, targeting early 2031. However, the Inspector General has been skeptical about the practicality of such an ambitious timeline. What comes next? In the years ahead, NASA is entering a new era of exploration aiming for deep space. These efforts are not merely technical milestones. They represent humanity's pursuit of knowledge and our enduring curiosity about the universe. As we look to the future, the question is not if we will explore, but how far are we willing to go?
Spreading out into space will have an even greater effect. It will completely change the future of the human race and maybe determine whether we have any future at all.